I came home from a brutal 12-hour shift at the construction site to find my kitchen sink bone dry, and when I tried the bathroom faucet, not even a drip came out. My name is Bryan Henderson, and I had just moved into this townhouse in Scottsdale, Arizona 3 months ago, thinking I had finally found a decent place to settle down after years of renting cramped apartments. The neighborhood seemed quiet, the price was right, and I figured dealing with a homeowners association would be no big deal. I was wrong about that last part. I checked my phone to see if there had been any notices about planned maintenance or water shutoffs in the area. Nothing. I walked outside and noticed my neighbor across the street watering his lawn without any issues. The water was clearly working fine for everyone else on the block. Something was very wrong here. I went back inside and tried every faucet in the house again, twisting the handles with increasing frustration. Not a single drop. That is when I noticed the letter tucked into my front door. I must have walked right past it when I came home, too tired to pay attention. The envelope had the HOA logo printed on it, some pretentious design with swooping letters that spelled out Sunset Ridge Community Association. I ripped it open and read the contents, my blood pressure rising with every word. The letter informed me that due to multiple violations of community standards, the HOA board had authorized the immediate disconnection of water service to my property, until such violations were remedied and appropriate fines were paid. The violations listed included an unauthorized vehicle parked in my driveway, failure to maintain front yard landscaping to community standards, and placement of trash bins visible from the street on a non-collection day. The letter was signed by Patricia Whitmore, HOA president. I read it 3 times, convinced I was missing something. An unauthorized vehicle. I drove a regular Ford pickup truck that I parked in my own driveway every single day. The landscaping looked fine to me, just some desert plants and gravel like half the other houses on the street. And the trash bin thing was ridiculous, because I had put my bins out the night before collection day, which was tomorrow morning. This was insane. My first instinct was to call the HOA office, but it was already past 6 in the evening and the voicemail informed me that office hours were Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. I hung up and tried to think rationally about the situation. I had no water. I could not shower, could not cook, could not even flush my toilet properly. This was not just an inconvenience, this felt illegal. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for information about HOA powers in Arizona. After about 20 minutes of reading through various legal websites and forum posts from other frustrated homeowners, I was pretty sure that what Patricia and her HOA board had done was completely illegal. HOAs in Arizona had a lot of power, but they could not just shut off essential utilities without going through the proper legal channels, which typically involved court orders and significant advance notice. I needed a lawyer, and I needed one fast. I spent another hour searching for attorneys who specialized in HOA disputes in the Scottsdale area. Most of the websites I found looked generic and unhelpful, but then I came across a firm called Desert Legal Group. Their site featured a photo of a sharp-looking attorney named Robert Chen, who apparently had won several major cases against overreaching HOAs. His bio mentioned that he had grown up in an HOA community and had witnessed firsthand how these organizations could abuse their power. That sold me. I sent an email through their contact form explaining my situation in detail, though I doubted anyone would see it until Monday morning. Then I packed an overnight bag because I realized I would need to find a hotel. I could not stay in a house with no water. Before I left, I took extensive photos and videos of every faucet in the house, documenting that they were all turned on but producing no water. I also photographed the letter from the HOA and took pictures of my truck in the driveway, my front yard, and my trash bins. If this was going to turn into a legal battle, I wanted documentation. The cheapest decent hotel I could find nearby was a Holiday Inn Express that cost me $98 for the night. I checked in around 8:30, hauled my bag up to a sterile room on the 3rd floor, and immediately took a long shower just because I could. The hot water felt like a luxury I had taken for granted my entire life. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing through everything that had happened, replaying the wording of that letter, trying to figure out what I had done to deserve this kind of treatment. I had been a model resident as far as I knew. I paid my HOA fees on time every month, kept to myself, did not throw loud parties or cause any disturbances. The idea that they could just cut off my water over some trivial complaints was both infuriating and terrifying. Sunday morning, I checked my email on my phone and was surprised to see a response from Robert Chen himself, sent at 11:30 the previous night. He apologized for the late reply and said he had been reviewing emails before bed when he saw mine. He wrote that what the HOA had done was absolutely illegal and that we had grounds for a strong case against them. He asked if I could come to his office first thing Monday morning at 8, and said to bring all documentation I had, including the letter, photos, and any previous correspondence with the HOA. I spent most of Sunday at the hotel, leaving only to grab fast food and to drive by my house to make sure nothing else had happened. The place looked the same as when I had left it. I tried the front door faucet quickly and confirmed the water was still shut off. A couple walking their dog gave me a curious look, probably wondering why I was testing my own sink and then leaving again. Monday morning arrived with painful slowness. I had been awake since 5, too anxious to sleep anymore. I checked out of the hotel at 7 and drove to the address Robert had provided. Desert Legal Group operated out of a modern office building near Old Town Scottsdale, the kind of place with glass walls and contemporary art in the lobby. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and found their suite. The receptionist, a young woman named Amanda, greeted me warmly and said Robert was expecting me. She led me down a hallway to a corner office where Robert Chen stood up from behind his desk to shake my hand. He was probably in his early 40s, wearing an expensive-looking suit but with a casual demeanor that put me at ease immediately. "Bryan, thanks for coming in so early," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I have to tell you, I have seen HOAs pull some outrageous stuff over the years, but shutting off someone's water is a new low. Let me see what you have got." I handed him the letter from Patricia Whitmore and pulled out my phone to show him all the photos and videos I had taken. He examined everything carefully, occasionally nodding or making small notes on a legal pad. When he finished reviewing everything, he sat back in his chair and looked at me seriously. "This is cut and dried illegal," he said. "Arizona revised statutes are very clear that an HOA cannot interrupt utility services to a property, except in genuine emergencies involving immediate safety hazards. Even then, they have to restore service as quickly as possible and notify the homeowner. What they have done here is essentially extortion. They are trying to force you to comply with alleged violations by making your home uninhabitable." "So what do we do?" I asked. "First, I am going to draft a demand letter that will go out today via email and certified mail to your HOA board. It will inform them that they have 24 hours to restore your water service and that they are liable for any expenses you have incurred as a result of their illegal actions. including hotel costs. Second, if they do not comply immediately, we will file an emergency motion with the court to compel them to restore service and to hold them in contempt. Third, we are going to file a lawsuit against the HOA for damages, emotional distress, and violation of your rights under Arizona law. How much is this going to cost me? I asked, knowing that lawyers did not come cheap. Robert smiled. For cases like this, I work on contingency. That means I do not get paid unless we win or settle. When we do win, and trust me we will, my fee comes out of what the HOA pays. You would not owe me anything out of pocket. The only thing I need from you right now is to sign a retainer agreement authorizing me to represent you. That was better than I had hoped. Robert pulled up the agreement on his computer and printed it out. I read through it carefully, even though the legal language was dense and hard to follow. The basic terms seemed fair. He would get 30% of any settlement or judgment, and all court costs would be paid by the losing party, which he assured me would be the HOA. I signed the agreement and Robert immediately got to work. He had me write down a timeline of exactly what had happened, what time I had discovered the water was off, when I found the letter, everything. While I did that, he started drafting the demand letter on his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He asked me a few clarifying questions as he wrote, then printed out the final version for me to review. The letter was 3 pages of dense legal text, but the core message was clear and aggressive. It stated that the HOA had violated multiple state statutes, that their actions constituted illegal retaliation and interference with my property rights, and that I was entitled to immediate relief and substantial damages. It demanded that water service be restored within 24 hours and that the HOA preserve all documents related to the decision to shut off my water. The tone was professional but unmistakably threatening. "I love it," I said when I finished reading. "I am going to send this right now," Robert said. He pulled up the HOA's website and found an email address for Patricia Whitmore, as well as a general contact for the board. He attached the letter as a PDF and sent it off, then handed a printed copy to his receptionist to send via certified mail with return receipt requested. "Now we wait," Robert said. In my experience, once an HOA realizes they are dealing with a lawyer who knows what he is doing, they tend to back down pretty quickly. These boards are usually staffed by volunteers who let a little bit of power go to their heads. When they face real legal consequences, they fold. "What if they do not fold?" I asked. "Then we go to court and we crush them," Robert said simply. "But let's give them a chance to do the right thing first. Where are you staying tonight?" "I guess the same hotel as before," I said. "The Holiday Inn Express on Scottsdale Road." "Keep all your receipts," Robert instructed. "Every meal, every night at the hotel, any expenses related to not having water at your home, it all adds up and they are going to pay for it." I left Robert's office feeling better than I had since discovering my water was shut off. Having a lawyer on my side changed everything. I was not just some powerless homeowner anymore. I was someone fighting back with professional help. I went to the hotel and booked another night, making sure to get an itemized receipt. Then I drove back to my house to check on things. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a woman standing on the sidewalk staring at my property. She was probably in her mid-50s, with short blonde hair and wearing athletic clothes that looked expensive. She had that particular expression of disapproval that I had come to recognize on certain people, the look that said she had appointed herself guardian of neighborhood standards. "Can I help you?" I called out as I got out of my truck. "Are you Bryan Henderson?" she asked, walking toward my driveway with her arms crossed. "I am. Who are you? Patricia Whitmore, HOA president. I think you know why I am here. This was the woman who had signed the letter that had turned my life upside down. I felt anger surge through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. The last thing I needed was to give her ammunition by losing my temper. Actually, I do not know why you are here, I said evenly, but I am very interested to hear your explanation for why you shut off my water illegally. Her face tightened. It was not illegal. The HOA has the authority to enforce compliance with community standards through appropriate measures. Shutting off essential utilities is not an appropriate measure, and you know it, I said. Or at least your lawyer will explain it to you when you get sued. We have not been sued, Patricia said dismissively. And I came here to give you an opportunity to resolve this before it escalates further. If you remove that commercial vehicle from your driveway, bring your landscaping up to code, and pay the fines you owe, we can have your water turned back on this afternoon. That commercial vehicle is my personal truck that I drive to work, I said. My landscaping is identical to half a dozen other houses on this street, and I do not owe you any fines because I have not violated anything. What I do have is a lawyer who sent you a letter about an hour ago explaining that what you have done is illegal and that you are going to pay for it. Patricia's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. We have not received any letter from a lawyer. Check your email, I suggested, and check your mailbox in a few days for the certified copy. You have 24 hours to turn my water back on, or this gets a lot worse for you and everyone on that board. Are you threatening me? Patricia asked, her voice rising. No, I am informing you of the legal consequences of your actions, I said. There is a difference. A car pulled up across the street and my neighbor, an older man named Frank who I had spoken with a few times, got out and waved. Patricia glanced at him and then back at me, clearly uncomfortable with having an audience. This is not over, she said. You are right about that, I replied. But it will be over a lot faster if you just turn my water back on and admit you made a mistake. Patricia walked away without another word, pulling out her phone as she headed down the sidewalk toward a white Lexus SUV parked a few houses down. I watched her get in and drive off, then went inside to check the water again. Still nothing. Frank walked over from across the street looking concerned. Hey Bryan, everything okay? I saw you talking to Patricia and she looked pretty angry. The HOA shut off my water, I told him. Said I had violations that needed to be fixed, but it is all nonsense. I got a lawyer involved this morning. Frank's eyes widened. They shut off your water, can they do that? No, they cannot. That is why I got a lawyer. Good for you, man, Frank said. I have been dealing with this HOA for 10 years, and they have gotten worse every single year. Patricia took over as president about 2 years ago, and she has been on a power trip ever since. Last month they fined me $200 because my house number was not visible enough from the street, even though it has been the same since I moved in. Did you pay the fine? I asked. Yeah, I did, Frank admitted. I know I probably should have fought it, but I just did not want the hassle. My wife kept saying we should hire a lawyer, but I figured it was not worth it for $200. Well, maybe after I am done with them, they will think twice before pulling this stuff on other people, I said. Frank grinned. I hope so. Let me know if you need anything while you are dealing with this. I mean it. If you need to fill up water jugs from my place or whatever, just knock on the door. Thanks, I appreciate that, I said genuinely. I spent the rest of the afternoon at a coffee shop with free Wi-Fi, working on my laptop and trying to distract myself. Around 4:30, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I answered cautiously. Is this Bryan Henderson? A man's voice asked. Speaking. This is Donald Cross. I am the attorney representing the Sunset Ridge Community Association. I received a rather aggressive letter from your attorney this morning, and I wanted to reach out to discuss the situation." "What is there to discuss?" I asked. "Your client shut off my water illegally. They need to turn it back on immediately." "I have been reviewing the situation with the board," Donald said carefully, "and there seems to be some disagreement about whether proper procedures were followed. I have advised them to restore your water service while we sort this out." "That is great," I said. "When exactly will it be turned back on?" "I am pushing for it to happen today, but it may take until tomorrow morning depending on how quickly we can coordinate with the water company. These things are not always as simple as flipping a switch." "Well, I suggest you figure it out quickly," I said, "because every day I am without water is another day I am racking up hotel bills that your client is going to pay for." There was a pause on the other end. "Let's not be hasty about escalating this into expensive litigation. I am sure we can reach a reasonable resolution." "A reasonable resolution is you turn my water back on, you pay for my hotel and expenses, and your board apologizes for violating my rights," I said. "That is being more than reasonable considering I could ask for a lot more." "I will discuss this with my clients," Donald said, "but I need you to understand that they believe they were acting within their authority based on legitimate violations of the CC and Articus." "Then they are wrong and you should tell them that," I said. "I have not violated anything. They made up excuses to harass me, and they used illegal tactics to do it. If they had just sent me a normal warning letter like any reasonable HOA would do, we would not be having this conversation." "I hear your frustration," Donald said in a practiced, soothing tone. "Let me see what I can do. I will call you back tomorrow morning with an update." He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called Robert Chen and told him about the conversation. He listened carefully and then sighed. "Okay, so they are taking this seriously, which is good. But them maybe turning the water back on tomorrow is not good enough. You were entitled to have water yesterday. I am going to prepare the emergency motion for court tonight, and we will file it first thing tomorrow morning if your water is not back on." "Sounds good," I said. "How are you holding up?" Robert asked. "Pissed off, but okay," I said honestly. "I just want this over with." "It will be soon," Robert assured me. "Trust me, this HOA does not want to go to trial over this. Once we start discovery and depositions, everything they have done will come to light, and it will not look good for them." I spent another night at the Holiday Inn Express, ordering room service for dinner, and adding another $130 to the bill that the HOA was going to pay. I watched mindless television and tried not to think about how much I missed my own bed and my own house. This was only the third night without water, but it felt like much longer. Tuesday morning, I woke up early again and checked my email obsessively. Nothing from the HOA or their lawyer. At 8:30, Robert called me. "The water is not back on yet, is it?" he asked. "I have not checked this morning, but I doubt it," I said. "I am filing the emergency motion right now. We should have a hearing scheduled within a day or two. In the meantime, I am also going to reach out to the local news. They love stories about HOAs behaving badly, and the publicity will put pressure on the board to settle." "Do whatever you think is best," I told him. "Go check your house," Robert said. "Let me know if the water is on." I drove over to my place and went inside, heading straight for the kitchen sink. I turned the handle and heard a glorious sound, the gurgle and rush of water flowing through the pipes. It sputtered for a few seconds, spitting out some air and rust-colored water, but then it ran clear and strong. They had turned it back on. I called Robert immediately. "The water is on." "Excellent. That does not change anything about the lawsuit, but it is good that they finally did the right thing. Make sure you document everything." Take photos and videos showing the water is working now, and note the exact time. I did as he instructed, recording video of every faucet in the house working properly and checking the timestamp carefully. It was 9:47 on Tuesday morning, which meant I had been without water for about 3.5 days. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Robert filed the lawsuit against the Sunset Ridge Community Association, naming Patricia Whitmore and the other board members as defendants. The complaint laid out everything that had happened and demanded $5,000 in damages plus all legal fees and hotel costs. The number was strategic, Robert explained. It was high enough to punish the HOA and compensate me for what I had been through, but not so high that it would seem unreasonable to a judge. The local news did end up picking up the story. A reporter from a Phoenix television station came out to interview me in front of my house. I explained what had happened, keeping my tone calm and factual. The story aired that evening and absolutely blew up. Within 24 hours, it had been shared thousands of times on social media. People were outraged. I started getting messages from other homeowners in Scottsdale and across Arizona who had similar horror stories about their HOAs. The publicity was apparently too much for the Sunset Ridge Board to handle. On Friday afternoon, Robert called me with news. They want to settle, he said. Their lawyer reached out this morning with an offer. They will pay for all your hotel costs, reimburse you for any other expenses, pay the $5,000 in damages, and agree to pay all legal fees including mine. They also want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement saying you would not talk about this publicly anymore. What about an apology? I asked. Not part of the offer, but we can ask for it, Robert said. What do you think about the settlement otherwise? I think the NDA is garbage, I said. They are trying to shut me up so other people do not find out how badly they screwed up. I do not want to sign that. I agree completely, Robert said. Let me push back on that. We have all the leverage here, especially after the news coverage. They are desperate to make this go away. Robert went back and forth with the HOA's lawyer over the next few days. The HOA tried to lower the damages to $3,000, but Robert refused. They tried again to include the NDA, but Robert made it clear that was a deal breaker. Finally, on Wednesday of the following week, they agreed to everything. $5,000 in damages, full reimbursement for all expenses including hotels and meals, all legal fees paid, and no NDA. The only thing they would not do was issue a public apology, but I did not really care about that. The lawsuit and the news coverage had already embarrassed them enough. The settlement was formalized in a written agreement that both sides signed. The HOA had 30 days to pay everything, though Robert said he expected them to pay within a week to avoid any further bad press. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a detective with the Scottsdale Police Department named Sarah Brennan. She asked if I would be willing to come down to the station to answer some questions about the HOA matter. I called Robert first to make sure it was okay, and he said he would meet me there. At the police station, Detective Brennan led Robert and me into a small interview room. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with short dark hair and a direct manner of speaking. "Mr. Henderson, thank you for coming in," she began. "We have been conducting an investigation into the Sunset Ridge Community Association based on a complaint we received from another resident. Your situation came to our attention during that investigation." "What kind of investigation?" I asked. "We have reason to believe that members of the HOA board, specifically Patricia Whitmore, may have engaged in criminal conduct including extortion, fraud, and misuse of HOA funds. We are building a case, but we need cooperation from people who have been affected by their actions." Robert leaned forward. "What specifically do you need from my client?" "We would like him to provide a formal statement about what happened, including all documentation he has. We would also like to know if he experienced any threats or coercion beyond what was in the lawsuit." I told Detective Brennan everything that had happened, from finding the water shut off to the confrontation with Patricia in my driveway. I gave her copies of all the photos and documents I had, though Robert kept the originals. When I finished, Detective Brennan nodded thoughtfully. "What you experienced was definitely illegal," she said. "We are seeing a pattern with this HOA. Patricia Whitmore has apparently been targeting homeowners she personally dislikes and using HOA powers to harass them. In at least 3 other cases, she shut off utilities or filed frivolous liens against properties. She also appears to have been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including landscaping at her own home." "Is she going to be arrested?" I asked. "We are working toward that," Detective Brennan said. "The case is still being built, but we expect to bring charges within the next month or so. I wanted to give you a heads up that you might be called as a witness if this goes to trial." "I will do whatever you need," I said. Over the following weeks, I kept in touch with Robert as the criminal investigation progressed. The settlement money came through from the HOA exactly as agreed. I received a check for $5,000 in damages, plus another $2,000 to cover all the hotel stays, meals, and incidental expenses. Robert's fee, around $8,000, was paid directly to his firm. All told, the HOA had paid out $15,000 because of their illegal actions against me. The story continued to get attention. I did a few more interviews with local media, and a national news website even picked up the story. I heard from dozens of people who were dealing with similar issues with their HOAs. Some of them ended up hiring Robert as their attorney. He told me that my case had opened the floodgates, and he was busier than he had ever been. In late March, about 2 months after the water shutoff incident, Detective Brennan called to tell me that Patricia Whitmore had been arrested. She was charged with multiple counts of extortion, fraud, and embezzlement. 2 other board members were also arrested for their roles in covering up Patricia's actions. The local news covered the arrests extensively, and I felt a grim sense of satisfaction watching Patricia being led out of the police station in handcuffs on television. The criminal case moved slowly through the legal system, as these things always do. Patricia hired an expensive defense attorney and tried to fight the charges, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Detective Brennan had done thorough work, documenting years of abusive behavior and financial misconduct. In addition to shutting off my water, Patricia had apparently shut off electricity to 2 other homes, filed bogus liens on 5 properties, and embezzled nearly $30,000 in HOA funds for personal use. In June, Patricia accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to 3 counts of extortion and 1 count of embezzlement. In exchange for the plea, the prosecution dropped several other charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in county jail, 5 years of probation, and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and to the homeowners she had victimized. The other board members who were arrested received lesser sentences, mostly probation and community service, since their roles had been more passive. The entire Sunset Ridge HOA board was dissolved, and a new one was elected by the homeowners. The new board immediately implemented reforms, including strict oversight of any enforcement actions and a prohibition on shutting off utilities under any circumstances. I stayed in my house and even started to enjoy living in the neighborhood once Patricia was gone. The new HOA board was reasonable and professional. They sent friendly reminders about minor issues instead of threatening letters. They organized community events that people actually wanted to attend. It felt like a completely different place. Frank from across the street became a good friend. He had been one of the homeowners who filed a complaint with the police about Patricia after she had threatened to put a lien on his house over the house number issue. He told me that my decision to fight back had given him and others the courage to come forward with their own stories. Robert and I stayed in touch as well. He sent me a bottle of expensive whiskey as a thank you gift, along with a note that said my case had been exactly the kind of fight he had gone into law to win. I appreciated that. It was nice to know that there were still lawyers out there who genuinely cared about justice and not just billable hours. Looking back on the whole experience, I realized how close I had come to just accepting what Patricia had done. If I had not gotten angry enough to fight back, if I had not found Robert, if I had just paid the bogus fines and moved my truck and let them bully me, nothing would have changed. Patricia would have continued abusing her power, and other homeowners would have continued suffering. The $5,000 in damages was nice, and getting reimbursed for all my expenses was fair, but the real victory was knowing that I had helped take down a corrupt HOA president and made things better for everyone in the community. That was worth more than any settlement check. I also learned a lot about HOAs and how they operate. They can be a force for good when run by reasonable people who genuinely care about maintaining property values and community standards. But they can also become petty tyrannies when the wrong people get into power. The legal protections for homeowners exist, but you have to be willing to assert them. You have to be willing to stand up and fight back when your rights are violated. That is exactly what I did when Patricia Whitmore shut off my water illegally. I got a lawyer, I documented everything, I fought back through the legal system, and I won. The HOA paid for my hotel, paid me $5,000 in damages, and ultimately Patricia ended up in jail where she belonged. My life went back to normal after everything was settled. I continued working construction, coming home tired every day to a house with functioning water and a reasonable HOA. I even started dating a woman I met at one of the new community events, a teacher named Emily who lived a few streets over. Things were good. One evening in August, I was sitting on my back patio with a beer, enjoying the desert sunset, when my phone buzzed with an email. It was from a homeowner in Tucson who had seen the news coverage of my case. He was dealing with an HOA that had put a lien on his house for allegedly violating architectural guidelines. He asked if I could recommend my lawyer. I forwarded him Robert's contact information and told him to mention my name. Then I sat back and watched the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and purple. Somewhere in Arizona, another homeowner was about to fight back against an abusive HOA. Maybe they would win like I did. Maybe more corrupt board members would face consequences. Maybe, slowly, things would get better. I took another sip of beer and smiled. It felt good to be someone who had stood up for himself and won. It felt good to know that Patricia Whitmore was sitting in a jail cell thinking about what she had done. And it felt especially good to know that I was home in my house, with water flowing through every pipe exactly as it should be. The whole ordeal had lasted less than 3 months from start to finish, but it had changed my perspective on a lot of things. I used to think that fighting the system was pointless, that individuals did not stand a chance against organizations with money and power. But I had learned that was not true. With the right lawyer and the willingness to stand your ground, you could win. You could hold people accountable. You could make a difference. I never did find out exactly why Patricia had targeted me in the first place. Maybe she did not like my truck, or maybe she just enjoyed exercising power over people. Some people are like that. They get a little authority and it goes straight to their head. They forget that other people have rights too. They forget that actions have consequences. Well, Patricia had learned about consequences the hard way. 18 months in jail, a criminal record, and the complete destruction of her reputation in the community. All because she decided to shut off my water over some made-up violations. It was a steep price to pay, but she had earned every bit of it. The settlement money was long since deposited in my bank account. I had used some of it to take a weekend trip to San Diego with Emily, and I had put the rest into savings. It was not life-changing money, but it was a nice cushion to have. More importantly, it represented justice. It represented the fact that I had been wronged, and the legal system had made it right. Robert told me that the publicity from my case had led to proposed legislation in the Arizona State Senate that would impose stricter regulations on HOAs and make it easier for homeowners to fight back against abuse. I did not know if the legislation would pass, but the fact that people were even talking about it felt like progress. As the sun fully set and the desert air started to cool, I went back inside my house. I walked to the kitchen and turned on the faucet, watching the water flow. It was such a simple thing, something I had taken for granted my entire life until it was taken away from me. Now I appreciated it every single day. I thought about all the homeowners out there who were dealing with abusive HOAs right now, people who felt powerless and trapped. I hoped that some of them had heard my story. I hoped they knew that fighting back was possible, that winning was possible, and that justice was possible if you were willing to pursue it. My phone buzzed again. Another email, this time from a news producer, asking if I would be interested in being interviewed for a documentary about HOA abuse. I replied that I would think about it. Part of me wanted to put the whole thing behind me and move on with my life. But another part of me felt obligated to keep telling the story, to keep shining a light on this issue, to help other people who were going through what I had gone through. I poured the rest of my beer down the sink, watching it swirl down the drain with the water that Patricia Whitmore had tried to take away from me. Then I grabbed my keys and headed out to meet Emily for dinner. Life was good again. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. And every time I turned on a faucet in my house, I was reminded of how close I had come to letting them get away with it, and how glad I was that I had decided to fight back instead. That decision had changed everything. It had cost Patricia her freedom, cost the HOA thousands of dollars, and sent a message that homeowners had rights that could not be trampled on without consequences. As I drove through the Scottsdale streets toward the restaurant where I was meeting Emily, I passed the entrance to my neighborhood and saw the Sunset Ridge Community Association sign. It looked the same as always, that pretentious swooping lettering that had once filled me with frustration and anger. Now it just looked like a sign. Patricia's reign of terror was over. The corrupt board had been swept out. A new era had begun. I thought about Detective Brennan and the work she had put into building the criminal case. I thought about Robert Chen and his skill in navigating the legal system. I thought about Frank and the other neighbors who had come forward with their own stories of abuse. It had taken all of us working together to bring down Patricia and her enablers. That was another lesson I had learned from this experience. You are not alone, even when it feels like you are. Other people are dealing with the same problems. Other people want to see justice done. You just have to be willing to speak up and take that first step. Everything else follows from there. Dinner with Emily was great. We talked and laughed and did not mention the HOA situation once. That part of my life was over, filed away as a crazy story I could tell at parties. The scars had healed. The anger had faded. All that remained was the satisfaction of knowing I had done the right thing. Later that night, lying in my own bed in my own house with functioning water and a reasonable HOA, I reflected on how much had changed since that day I came home from work to find my kitchen sink bone dry. It felt like a lifetime ago, even though it had only been a few months. The Bryan Henderson who had found that letter from Patricia Whitmore was a different person than the one lying here now. That Bryan had been tired, defeated, willing to accept whatever unfair treatment came his way because fighting back seemed too hard. This Bryan knew better. This Bryan had learned that standing up for yourself was not only possible but necessary. This Bryan had won. I fell asleep thinking about all the homeowners I had heard from over the past few months, people who had thanked me for sharing my story, people who had been inspired to fight their own battles with abusive HOAs. If my experience could help even one person stand up for their rights, then everything I had gone through was worth it. The next morning, I woke up refreshed and ready for another day. I took a long shower, grateful for the hot water. I made coffee and breakfast in my kitchen, using water from my sink without a second thought. These simple things that had once been automatic now felt like small victories. Before I left for work, I checked my email one more time. The homeowner from Tucson had written back to thank me for the referral. He had spoken with Robert and felt hopeful for the first time in months. He said that knowing someone else had been through this and one made all the difference. I smiled and closed my laptop. That was what it was all about. Not the settlement money or the news coverage or the satisfaction of seeing Patricia get arrested. It was about standing up to bullies, holding people accountable, and showing others that they did not have to accept injustice. As I climbed into my truck, the same truck that Patricia had called an unauthorized commercial vehicle, I felt a deep sense of peace. The battle was over. I had won. And more importantly, I had helped make sure that Patricia Whitmore would never be able to abuse her power over homeowners again. I backed out of my driveway and headed toward the construction site where I worked. It was going to be another long, hard day of physical labor under the Arizona sun. But I did not mind. Hard work I could handle. What I could not handle, what I would never accept again, was someone trying to take away my basic rights and make my home uninhabitable over petty, made-up violations. That was the line I had drawn, and I had defended it successfully. The HOA had shut off my water illegally, thinking they could bully me into compliance. Instead, my lawyer had made them pay for my hotel, pay me $5,000 in damages, and ultimately the HOA president had ended up in jail. It was not the ending Patricia Whitmore had expected when she signed that letter, but it was exactly the ending she deserved. Justice had been served, and I had my life back. That was all I had ever wanted. The sun was rising over the desert as I drove, painting the sky in brilliant colors. It was going to be a beautiful day. And unlike those few days when my water was shut off, unlike those nights I spent in a hotel wondering if I would ever get justice, unlike those moments when I felt powerless and angry, today I felt strong. I felt like someone who had faced an injustice and fought back and won. I felt like someone who had made a difference. And as I merged onto the highway, heading toward another day of honest work, I knew that whatever challenges came my way in the future, I would face them with the same determination that had carried me through the battle with the HOA. Because I had learned the most important lesson of all: you do not have to accept being treated unfairly. You can fight back. You can win. And when you do, you make things better not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. That was my story. That was how an HOA shut off my water illegally, and how my lawyer made them pay for my hotel and $5,000 in damages. It was a story of injustice and accountability, of standing up to bullies, and of the power of the legal system when used correctly. And every single day, when I turned on the water in my house, I remembered exactly how valuable that victory had been.